Well, hello there. I'm Jen Jackson, mother of 11 beautiful children. While my life is filled with wonder and adventure, it can sometimes be laced with confusion and what feels like chaos. Can you relate? My goal is to point out that while motherhood can have its moments of difficulty, it can also be beautiful and marvelous. As a mother, you have a superpower that cannot be duplicated. You are the true Captain Marvel. Let's talk about it. Welcome to episode 16 of Marvelous Motherhood with Mama Jen. And today we'll be talking about our children's future partners. Let's face it, our children start off as tiny little adorable babies. They grow up to be rambunctious and curious toddlers, then very opinionated children, and then they become teenagers and young adults who are working to be independent. We are raising and training little adults who are going to go out into the world and start their own families and businesses and careers and educational journeys. And we need to be prepared. We work on their educational preparations with homeschooling or with sending them off to public or private schools. We work on them being healthy by trying to give them good meals to eat and remind them not to eat too much candy and show them how to brush their teeth. We help them in so many ways, but sometimes as parents and even as mothers, we forget to teach our children good lessons in romantic relationships. Now, of course, I talked about in another podcast the importance of discussing sex with our children from a young age so they can know what's appropriate and what's inappropriate to keep them safe from predators. We talked about that before, but we're talking about relationships in general. When it comes to romantic relationships, sometimes parents forget that our children need instructions in that area as well. Some parents make the mistake of thinking, oh, my child will know that if someone, treats them poorly or hits them or insults them, that that's not a good life partner. The unfortunate truth is, a lot of times, many young adults and older adults grow up not understanding the importance of recognizing and avoiding people with red flags. So I want to talk about the importance of pointing that out to our children, reminding them that it is okay to vet people. That just because you have strong feelings for someone or someone expresses strong feelings for you doesn't mean that that is the person that they are meant to be with for the rest of their lives and the one that they need to marry. We need to let our children know that if they are Christians and they're saving themselves for marriage, but they made the choice to have sex outside of marriage, that they're not now obligated to marry that person. Believe it or not, there are people who believe that they are. I had sex with this person. I said I was going to save myself for marriage and I didn't. So now I'm going to marry this person. You are not obligated to marry that person. There are those who have been with someone for 7 years and never got married, and they just feel like this is the person I have to be with. They cheated on me a few times, but they said they were sorry. They probably won't do it again. We need to teach our children that when someone treats you poorly, you are not obligated to stay with that person, no matter how many years you've been with that person. So we want to teach our children these following things. First, prayer. Teach our children to pray for their future spouses and their future children. Pray for any specific things they want to pray for concerning them. Pray for their good health. Pray for their intelligence. Pray for their wisdom and intellect, and pray for their sense of common sense. Pray for their integrity. Pray for them to just whatever it is that they can think of that they would love in a spouse. They need to pray for that. Pray for their success in life, their business savvy, their spiritual growth and spiritual maturity, their emotional health. Whatever they can think of, pray for their future spouses and their children ahead of time. But they need to also pray for their own selves to have wisdom, to know what to look for in a spouse, to know what to avoid, and to be properly warned by the Holy Spirit against someone who may be completely wrong or bad for them. So we want to first teach our children to pray well in advance. We also want to teach our children about kindness, to show kindness to everyone, even to our enemies. but also to expect kindness from others. If you have a significant other or a boyfriend or a girlfriend who makes a habit of joking about you and saying insulting things about you and saying, oh, I'm just joking, or don't be too serious, teach your children that that is not kindness. And they need to always choose kindness. They have to choose to be kind themselves, and they have to choose to be in romantic partnerships with someone who is also kind to them. And to never accept someone who bullies them or abuses them, whether it's emotionally, physically, psychologically, or financially. Any kind of abuse is always unacceptable. Teach your children that from a young age. There are so many young adults, especially young women, who allow themselves to be stuck in abusive relationships because they didn't learn from a young age that once you see it the first time, go the other way. You are not obligated to stay with someone who treats you poorly, especially if you're not married to that person. You're just boyfriend and girlfriend. Even if you are engaged to be married and your wedding is the next week or the next day and you have already started receiving wedding gifts, you do not have to go through with marrying that person who abuses you or mistreats you or who cheats on you. If you decide at the last minute, I don't want to marry this person, it is not the end of the world if you let your guests know, I'm sorry, I've changed my mind. I realize I'm about to make a big mistake. The world will go on. Those guests who are planning on coming to your wedding will move along. Life goes on. Your life will not end. Teach your children this. Teach your children that when they are single, they are never, ever obligated to marry someone they know that they should not marry. Don't let your child be trapped. Now, as I go through this list of things to talk to our children about, I want you to remember that once they are adults, it will, of course, be their own choice. But you will have done your due diligence in teaching your children the proper ways to choose a life partner. And we all know that people change sometimes, and those wonderful people who we were in love with in the beginning can change their philosophy on life and take on a whole new personality or develop a whole new addiction or give in to temptations. All kinds of things happen. But I'm talking about in their dating years, before they attach themselves to someone for the rest of their lives, that they can do some practical things to protect themselves. So the first thing I'm saying is teach your children to pray ahead of time for their future spouses and their future children. Also, the second one is when it comes to choose kindness. They must be kind and they must expect kindness from their future partners. The next thing is money. Teach your children to pay attention to how their significant other handles money. Because if your significant other is bad with money, owes a lot of money, allows themselves to get trapped into loans and credits that has incredibly high interest rates and things like that. For example, a car note with a super high interest rate. If they have bad credit, I'm not saying you should not marry that person because they have bad credit, but how is their relationship with money? Are they toxic with money? Are they constantly secretive with money? Your child will have to decide if they want to be a part of that circus. Because once you marry someone, your spouse's money habits will 100% affect you. And so you want to teach your children that if they are bad with money or secretive or have a gambling problem or constantly living paycheck to paycheck or never keeping a job, they're not suddenly going to be better with money because they married you. Those bad habits will follow you into the marriage. So as a young adult, your child will have to decide whether or not they want to live like that for the rest of their lives, because you can't change a person. A person will change when they want to change, and you can't think to yourself that they will get better with money because now we're going to have children in the family and they're going to realize they have to do better. No, that's not the truth. They will get better if they want to get better, but they won't get better just because they had a child or just because they married you or just because you're combining finances suddenly. And that's another part of the money conversation to have with their spouse, with their future spouse, is whether or not they want to combine finances. Someone who's secretive with their money will remain secretive after they get married. So teach your child to pay attention to that, to not just get sucked up in how they make them feel or how beautiful she is or how incredibly cute or handsome he is or how special he makes you feel when you go out on dates and the kind of places they take you, because all of that in the beginning is all a part of the enamored phase, the limerence. You're falling in love. You have strong emotions. It's like a roller coaster. But if you're planning on marrying someone, however their personality is today, however they are with money today, however they are with their kindness or meanness or bullying or abuse today, is how they will be when you get married. People do change over time, but there's no guarantee that they will. So how much are you willing to put up with? Ask your child to ask themselves that question when it comes to their future spouses. Another part is to remind your child of paying attention to things that are considered red flags. If they're unsure about whether or not they should continue a relationship, ask them if they have a little sister or brother. If your little sister brought home a guy who talked to her like that, would you tell her to just stay with him and eventually he'll change? Or if they have a child already, if your son grew up and was dating a girl who constantly insults him and calls him a loser, would you tell your son to stay with that person? Tell them to put themselves outside of the situation of the relationship and look at it as if they're looking from the outside in and see if that's a healthy dynamic. Encourage your children to pay attention and to not be led purely by physical attraction or emotional feelings. So sometimes we might think, oh, our child would know that already. Oh, she disrespects him. He knows not to continue dating someone who disrespects him. But not all people know that. We all, I think, any adult who's listening now knows at least one adult, if not more, who is in a relationship with someone who is abusive or toxic and has still gone through with marrying that person or staying in a relationship with that person in spite of the abuse or toxicity. It's not as common sense knowledge as we may think it is, and it's important to teach our children that. So even as things pop into your head and arise, if you notice something that's bad and you want to teach your children about it, take a moment and say, hey guys, life talk, I'm going to tell you about this thing. Tell it to them as it comes to you. You don't have to wait until some special occasion. You don't have to wait till you turn a certain age. Your child can be 8 years old or 10 years old, and you can say, hey, when you get older and you start to find somebody that you think you might want to marry, but they're always mean to you or calling you names, then that's not the person you should marry. You shouldn't marry somebody who abuses you that way, because constantly putting you down and calling you names is verbal abuse, and you should not marry someone who abuses you. Some people just never learn that. There are some people, adults today, even today still, this is old-fashioned thinking, but there are people today who still believe this. But there are people who are in abusive relationships or a relationship with someone who's a cheater or someone who doesn't want them. And they think that if I have a baby with this person, this is more of a woman thought. If I have a baby with this person, then he will grow up. Then he will keep a job. Then he will stop being abusive. Then he will choose to stay with me and stop cheating on me. That is a thing that there are women and young girls who think that is true, and it is not true. So make the habit of saying these things that you think are common sense. Make a habit of saying these things and teaching these things to your children, because they are not as common sense as we think they are. We know better because we have lived life and we have seen things. But for our children, everything in the world is new to them. Even when they're teenagers, when it comes to relationships and dynamics like that, those are new to them. So from a young age, start to teach your children what a true friend looks like, what a true partner in life looks like, what a healthy relationship looks like. How is it that people are supposed to talk to each other? We're not supposed to yell at each other or cuss at each other or call each other names. We're not supposed to hit each other. Make these things obvious to your children so that when they grow up and they start to have romantic partnerships, they can know, oh, this is not right. This is not what a healthy relationship looks like. Oh, no one should be talking to me by raising their voice. We're having a conversation. Why are you yelling? Your children should be able to pick up on it right away and not think that this is just how relationships are. Oh, people fight. Sometimes people have bad days, and it's okay if he called me out my name this time. You need to teach your children from a young age that is unacceptable and that is not a normal and healthy way to have a relationship. So those are the four main things that I want us to focus on as mothers, teaching our children. Because as I said, they may be children now, no matter how young they are. But one day, by the grace of God, they will become adults, teenagers and young adults, and they will be looking for romantic partnerships as their biological clocks start ticking and their hormones start changing and puberty starts making new changes to their bodies. They will need to know what a healthy relationship looks like. So teach your children these four main things. Pray in advance for their future spouses and children. Choose kindness. They have to be kind, but also expect kindness from their partners. Pay attention to how that person handles their finances and money. And also point out red flags to them from a young age. If you notice one in somebody that you've just seen or observed, point it out to your kids. Hey guys, this is considered a red flag. When your partner hits you because he's mad, that's a red flag. When your partner's throwing things and punching the wall because they can't regulate their emotions, that's a red flag. When your partner is calling you names in the middle of a conversation or joking about how fat you are or how bad your breath smells and insulting you in front of other people and telling you that you're too sensitive when you get upset, that's a red flag. Point out red flags to your children on a regular basis so they can recognize them early. And not when they've already been with the person for 4 or 5 years and realizing, oh, all this time, they should not have been talking to me this way and that. And the last thing, besides those four things, that's for when it comes to choosing a romantic partner. Pray, kindness, finances, and what different red flags look like. Those are the four things with choosing. But remind them that once they have chosen the person, even if they prayed and they saved themselves for marriage and they were very particular on vetting the person, remind them that we're all human beings, and over time, with new exposure, social media, the news media, different friend groups, different clubs, different situations in life, different circumstances and tragedies that happen, over time, people change. So even, for example, if you are a Christian and you made sure you were only going to marry another Christian who loved God, and you found someone who taught Bible study with you and went to church with you, that person, because of circumstances in their life, they might change when they get older. So teach your children this part about romantic relationships as well. You may have done all the correct vetting and all the praying, but you can't control if the circumstances in life causes that person to change their philosophy on life and to change their personalities. Sometimes people do change. And if they change for the worst, remind your children that if your spouse who you love changed for the worse, suddenly became, or over time became a cheater, or over time decided they didn't want to go to church anymore, or over time decided to start being bad with money, or decided to start gambling and develop an addiction to gambling or to drugs or to drinking. If over time your partner has changed for the worse, teach your children not to blame themselves. Because that's another thing when it comes to romantic partnerships, that sometimes the husband or wife will blame themselves for the bad choices that their spouses are making. Teach your children now from a young age that when somebody else does bad behavior, that it is not their fault. Teach them to not blame themselves for somebody else's bad choices. Teach them that from a young age so that if or when they do experience that, they can remember they've already learned and been trained. This is not my fault. They won't have to go down that long journey or at least be in that space of blaming themselves for too long, because they have already learned that you should never blame yourself for somebody else's bad choices. Teach them that they can pray for the person who is doing the wrong thing, that they can make suggestions, that they can calmly have conversations for them, but to remind them that they cannot change someone. If God himself chose to let everyone have free will, and God himself doesn't force anybody to change, then who are we to think that we are going to force someone to change? Who are we to think that we can take away someone else's free will, even if that free will is to do the wrong thing? So teach your child that part of romantic partnerships as well, that sometimes even the most wonderful person you can think of can turn out to cheat on you 15 years down the line, or can turn out to develop some kind of addiction to gambling or drugs or alcohol or pornography down the line. Could meet a new group of quote-unquote friends who teach them a new way to live that they think is more exciting than living as a family person, a family man, or a family woman. But when or if that person does change for the worse, don't blame yourself. But also remind them when it comes to these changes that they might be the person who changes. And remind them that when or if you start to change your beliefs on things or your habits, be considerate enough to discuss them with your partner in life, because they marry a certain person, and now that you're changing, they need to know what they're getting next. And don't hide from your partners. So teach those things to your children when it comes to romantic partnerships. And I'm not saying to sit down and have one long talk with all of this information one time when they turn, 12 or 15 or whatever your age is. I'm just saying throughout your life, the same way you want to talk about God's word on a regular basis, talk about future partners and relationships on a regular basis as well, so that it can be ingrained in your children, so they can understand what healthy relationships and partnerships and dynamics look like from a young age. And as a believing woman, I also emphasize teaching your children that according to God's standards, a married couple is one man and one woman. One man being the husband, one woman being the wife, getting together, marrying, being fruitful and multiplying, being committed to one another, not bringing other people into their marriage sexually, not through pornography, not through any type of swinging relationships, and not through an open marriage. Those are not biblical standards. So if you're teaching your child biblical standards as well, you remind them that God chose for husband and wife to be a heterosexual relationship, and that men are not to marry men or be in romantic partnerships with them, and women are not to marry women or be in romantic partnership with them. So all of these values and good things that you know about healthy relationships and healthy dynamics, teach them to your children. Do not assume that they will figure it out. One thing I've learned is that it's important to pay attention and to stick up for yourself. So teach your children that. Pay attention to your romantic partnerships. Speak up for yourself if you're being mistreated. Don't hold your tongue. No, I'm not saying start an argument and yell and curse and all those things. But speak up and say, it hurt me when you said this. I feel this way when you act like that. It's okay to talk about it. Now, if your child isn't married yet and still dating, and someone is doing something that hurts them or concerns them, tell them that if you tell your boyfriend or girlfriend something that's bothering you and they blow you off, or they tell you that you're being too sensitive, or they totally ignore you, cut you off, blame you, shift the blame, whatever, remind them that that is a red flag. So, but it's important to still stick up for yourself. So one of the things I've learned is to pay attention, stick up for yourself, and also check yourself often. Because we may be talking about watching out for those future partners, but your children are humans also. They are just as capable of being the ones to be abusive. They are just as capable of being the abusive one, being the mean one, being the unkind one, being the one with the sudden changes and irresponsibility and a bad relationship with money. So teach your children to check themselves also, because maybe they're the ones who's blowing off their partner's feelings and emotions, who's refusing to talk about things, who's calling names and cursing and yelling. So teach your children to check themselves also, to make sure that they are being kind and considerate partners themselves. Motherhood is marvelous because we become disciplers, knowing that we have little time on this earth to train these people, knowing that we have little humans who are learning to be adult humans by watching us. And that challenges us to do better and to be better. So what do you think, my fellow sister in motherhood? Leave a comment or send me an email, which is in the description. And have a marvelous day, Mama. You've got this.